Can I just tell you before I start this morning that the Joint Council of the Church of England in Wigan is meeting, I believe, this Tuesday to decide when churches can open. We'll let you know as soon as we possibly can when our church will be open. Over the years, people have often asked me the same question. They ask it in different ways, but it's always the same question. Before I begin, however, I have to tell you that it's a question to which I only have my own very personal answer to. And in order to do this, I'm using other people's thoughts mixed up with my own. The question is so difficult to answer that I have to give you this sort of preamble so that when I fail, which I will, that you won't be too hard on me. The question is this: if God loves and cares for the world, then why does he allow disasters and suffering to happen? Well, our world is always shifting and changing, and it seems that this is a necessary part of life, almost a condition of living. God has given us this world with all its glories, beauty and splendour. Our world is also filled with pain and pleasure, sorrow and joy, life and death, happiness and disappointment. As human beings, we have the ability to make decisions, to feel empathy and understanding. We're able to feel deep love and also hate. We can dream and aspire. We can also be selfish and selfless. We've been given choice and with it freedom. And without free will, we would not be human. God has given to each of us freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of emotion, and freedom of action. This has been given to us so that we can change and we can influence our ever-changing universe. God has also given us, through his Son Jesus Christ, 2 commands to help us make our choices. They are to love God and to love our neighbour as much as we love ourselves. 2 seemingly very, very simple commandments, which in reality are very demanding. So can God, for instance, be blamed for wars? Well, my view is that wars are man-made by people and not by God, although God has been used as an excuse for nations making war many times over the years. People ask, why does God then not stop to intervene in wars? The truth is that if God were to stop war, then freedom and free will would no longer exist, and we would no longer be human. However, to say that God has never intervened would not be true, for God did intervene in the world 2,000 years ago, and because he intervened, he was crucified. Jesus Christ was sent by God to show humankind that there was a way to stop suffering. That way was to simply forgive and to love one another. The First World War, the Second World War, the years of tyranny in Russia under Stalin, Mao in China, the genocide of the Holocaust, Bosnia and Rwanda, the killing fields of Cambodia, and the destruction and death of Syria have nothing to do with God's will. They have nothing to do with loving God and your neighbour, but they do have a great deal to do with personal ambition, the ambition of some people and some nations at the expense of others. A harder question arises when somebody asks, well, why does this pandemic happen which causes so much suffering? Well, I don't really know the answer to that because I'm not God. But there is something which I do know, and it's this. Something which Jonathan Sacks, one-time chief rabbi, talks about when he says that we're all called by God to be partners in the work of creation. So when something like a disaster happens, our response must be to say, God, I don't know why this has happened, but I do know what you want of us. You want us to help the afflicted, comfort the bereaved, try to heal the sick, and help those who need any kind of help. We cannot understand God, but we can try to imitate his love and his care. When something bad happens, perhaps we should ask, how does God feel? Whenever someone suffers, somebody close to them also suffers. So why should it be different with God? Most of you, I will guess, can ride a bicycle. I wonder how many of you can remember riding a two-wheeler for the first time. My first bike was green. I can see it now. And I can also remember my dad teaching me and my brother to ride our bikes without stabilizers. Let's look at a parent teaching a child to ride a bike. Just think of the parent as God and the child as you or I. The parent holds up the child until they get going, and then at some point they have to let them go. The child falls. The child, through their tears, cries, "What did you do that for?" Followed by, "Why did you let that go? Why did you drop me?" The child is hurt and just cannot understand why a usually protective and loving parent has let them fall and hurt themselves. But the child will never learn to ride a bike and experience the freedom which riding that bike will bring if the parent will not be willing to let them go. I hear you say, but surely you can't compare the suffering of a fall from a bike with human suffering. So why does God allow suffering? Well, you can't ride a bike without a certain amount of suffering. A parent knows this and has to accept it if they're going to teach their child to ride a bicycle and give them the pleasure and freedom that they can only experience when freewheeling down a long steep hill with the wind behind them. When a parent brings a child into the world, they do so knowing all the risks which living will involve, and yet they still do it. But this does not indicate a lack of love or concern. However, it does suggest a calculated risk. There are things that as a parent you wish for your children, things which you wish that they will have, and there are things which you wish that they will never ever experience. You love them unconditionally. As a parent, we take the risk of giving life. We know the risk, and yet we give that gift of life to our children. I believe that this is also true of God. He knew, he must have known, the risk of creation. And yet, because of love, he too was willing to take that risk and give life to the earth and heavens and to everything which lies beyond them. Well, I told you that I would fail in answering the question of suffering, but I do hope that perhaps I may have given you something to think about. More importantly, we should always try and remember and think about the commandments which Christ left with us, those words which tell us exactly how to live life in all its wonder. Love God and love your neighbour as you love yourself. And if all human beings would do this, just imagine what a truly glorious, wonderful, wondrous place our world would really be.